feel free to clap if you want to.
These real collectors, they bring my phone. They bother me when I'm not at home. Ain't got no time to be fooling around. Feet hit the floor, then I get on down. I want money, lots and lots of money. I want the pie in the sky. I want money, lots and lots of money. So don't be asking me why. I wanna be rich. Oh, I wanna be rich. Oh, I wanna be rich. Oh, I wanna be rich. Full of love, peace, and happiness. I want my cake, wanna eat it too. I want the stars in the silver moon. I spend my money on lottery. My favorite numbers are 1, 2, 3. You see, I want money, lots and lots of money. I want the pie in the sky. You see, I want money, lots and lots of money. So don't be asking me why. I wanna be rich. Oh, I wanna be rich. Oh, I wanna be rich. Oh, I wanna be rich. Full of love, peace, and happiness.
Good morning, Access Church. Good morning. Can we get another round of applause for this amazing band up here? Y'all can see me. I was watching behind the stage. I saw some of y'all bobbing your heads and doing the shoulder shrug. I saw you. It's okay to dance in church. We love it. Welcome to Access Church. If it's your first time here with us, whether you're joining us in the audience here or joining us online, we are so happy that you chose to spend this time with us. There are a lot of things that you could spend your Sunday doing, and we are so glad that you chose to be here with us today. Actually, it's a good day to be here because I know why everybody is super excited. Everybody, you know why? Everybody knows. I see it. That's right. Because that's right. Those no's last night. We're on what we call a streak, people. If you win more than one game in a row, it's called a winning streak. So hand clap for the no's. But for all these Tennessee fans and you Alabama fans, I'm going to teach y'all a line that we Seminoles learned a long time ago. There's always next year. So just keep that in mind. So some things we're going to be talking about today. We have our lead pastor, Rich Barrett. He's going to be starting off a brand new series with us, Relating with Money. We're not talking about budgeting. We're also not talking about giving to the church. We're going to be talking about how you can have conversations that enrich your relationship. Money is one of those things nobody wants to talk about. So Rich is going to go into detail with that and talk about how we can make our relationships better by having that difficult conversation. Because it's such an important topic, he and Stephanie, his lovely wife Stephanie, are going to be hosting a short-term small group where they're going to be getting together in January where we can have some deeper conversations about it. Because conversations in church are great, but when you get into a small group in a circle, it makes it a lot more meaningful. Let's put it that way. Speaking of which, small groups. If you're not in a small group, do not fret, everyone, because come January, we will be having Group Link, which is where you can come in, meet some people, make some friends, and join a small group. Because right now, we're in these rows. Church is amazing in these rows. We get to sit next to each other. If you're on the front row, you even, maybe, depending on what church you go to, you get some waterworks. You get to hear the amazing band. But church is so much better when you're in circles versus in rows. Rows are great because you get to hear the word. But when you're in a circle, you get to talk amongst yourselves and have those more meaningful and deeper conversations. So that's Group Link. It'll be coming in January. Now, guys, we're going to be in this room for about an hour and 5 minutes, and you heard the band singing. Did they not sound amazing? Simply amazing, and they look good too. They were singing I Want to Be Rich. I'm not 100% sure if they were talking about money or if they were talking about they want to be Rich Barrett. I think either one would be a great experience, but I think I'll try them both out. Rich offered to lend me a shirt, but he's a little bit bigger than me. I'm just not, I don't have the muscle on me to do it. I can't pull it off. But the band's going to come back to us. They're going to sing some more songs. You've heard them already. If you want to hear more, come to your feet, high five your neighbor, give them a fist bump, do something, tell them you love them, tell them you're happy to see them, and we've got a great service for you lined up here for the rest of the day.
Let's put those hands together one more time this morning, Access Church. Just like that. All right, all right. Together, we were the beggars, now we're royalty. We were the prisoners, now we're running free. We are forgiven, accepted, redeemed by His grace. Let the house of the Lord sing praise. Sing it out. We were the beggars, now we're royalty. So good this morning, Access Church. Thank you for being here and singing with us. Let's keep it up. People come together, strangers, neighbors, the blood is one. Children of generation, every nation of kingdom with y'all every Sunday morning. We got a new song we're going to introduce to you today. It's a fairly easy one, so once you catch on, feel free to join us and sing with us. Let's do it. With 1,000 tongues to lift one cry, from the north to south and east to west, we hear Christ be magnified. Were the whole earth echoing his imminence, his name would burst from sea to sky. From the rivers to the mountain tops, we'd hear Christ be glorified. Let's sing. Oh, Christ be magnified. Let his praise arise. Christ be magnified in me. Oh, Christ be magnified from the altar of my life. Christ be magnified in me. When every creature finds its inmost melody, and every human heart its native cry, then in war and in raptured hymn we praise, we sing Christ be magnified. Oh, be lifted high. Oh, Christ be magnified. Let his praise arise. Christ be magnified in me. Oh, Christ be magnified from the altar of my life. Christ be magnified in me. I won't bow to idols. I'll stand strong and worship you. And if it puts me in the fire, I'll rejoice 'cause you're there too. I won't be formed by feelings. I'll hold fast to what is true. If the cross brings transformation, I'll be crucified with you. 'Cause death is just a doorway to resurrection life. When you return in glory, I'll join you when you rise. And when you return in glory, for the angels and the saints, my heart will still be singing. My song will
God, that's our prayer. That is our prayer this morning, God, that we would be magnified, that you would be magnified in us, that our lives would give you glory. Not just because we came to church on a Sunday and sang some songs, but because of the way that we love the people around us, the way that we love our spouse, the way that we love our kids, the way that we love our parents, the way that we love our community, our neighbors, our coworkers, our kids, friends, parents. God, help us to be the living embodiment of your love in this community. Change us on the inside so that your love overflows on the outside. That people around us would know that something is different because we've surrendered, as that song said, that we've, at the altar, given you our lives. God, we just ask that you would be at work in us and through us, that your love would be magnified, that your name would be known because of how we live. We ask all this in your name. Amen. Well, you may be seated, and students, you are dismissed. Maybe you're here today and you're not aware, but we are kicking off a new series today, and it is called Relating with Money. And now I know as soon as you hear the word money and church, you get a little bit nervous, right? But I want to put your mind at ease right off the bat. There's no big ask here today. Nobody is going to ask you to give money to the church. I used to think that people were uncomfortable with pastors talking about the topic of money because of that, because they thought, oh man, this is going to be about giving to the church. But I've actually learned, as I've talked to probably hundreds of couples over the years, that it's actually not that at all. It's that you don't like to talk about money anywhere. It's not just a church thing, it's just a money thing. It's a topic that makes us a lot of us uncomfortable. And it makes us uncomfortable because we have, let's just say, a checkered past with money. Many of us, right? For many of us, there are parts of our background, parts of our story that we just rather not share, and we would definitely rather not think about, and perhaps there's part of our tomorrow that we're not sure about and that we don't want to share, and you don't really appreciate me bringing up today. And I apologize for that, but I think we're going to take this in a really good, healthy direction today, because over these 3 weeks, my intention is not to teach you about money. I am not a money expert. I do enjoy the topic. I do like to read on the topic. My sister's a financial planner, and every year she takes me to a conference for financial planners, and I'm like the only pastor there, but I think it's fascinating because I think that we should understand how money affects not just our ability to retire or to fulfill our dreams or just to keep our head above water, but because money affects our relationships, and not just our relationships with the people around us. Money affects our relationship with God. In fact, Jesus talked more about money. Would you believe this? Jesus talked more about money than he did about heaven. He talked more about money than he did about love. He talked more about money than he did about grace. If you took the verses of what Jesus talked about all through the New Testament, 1 out of every 6 verses, Jesus is talking about money. Now, why is this? Why is Jesus so interested in the topic of money? And we're not going to go down this road too far today, but just to kind of help you understand why this is such a big deal. Jesus taught that money was the number one competitor that God has for your attention. The number one competitor that God has for your attention is your money. So there's nothing wrong with money, right? Sometimes people misquote the Bible and they say, oh, money's the root of all evil. No, not the money, the love of money. Some of you guys know that verse. The love of money is the root of evil. And so God addresses money because it's a very real issue and it's everywhere. And we all have some stories about our money past, right? You can probably think about some that are a little bit humorous. You probably think about some that are a little bit tragic. You probably think about some that are really exciting, like the winning $1.6 billion lottery ticket that's in your pocket, right? It's not. Hate to be the one to break the news to you, but we're now up to $1.9 billion, or after taxes, $37.67. But it is, so why do we buy the lottery ticket? It's this idea that somehow there's going to be a ticket, there's going to be a pass, there's going to be kind of a way out of my current predicament. We're going to get into that in just a little bit. But first I want to share one of my money stories so you know that this is just me being vulnerable and transparent. This is a no judgment zone, please. But one of our money stories, this is just kind of a little one. But Stephanie has is she here today? Okay, good. So she had to leave earlier, but she has this stays between us, okay? Keep it in this room. She has an addiction. It's Diet Coke. Yes, Lisa has actually funded that addiction, sometimes dropping off Diet Cokes at our house. Thank you for that. Erin, you've encouraged her on our trips to Costa Rica and bought her Diet Coke in the morning. There seems to be a lot of you who seem to encourage this addiction, but we live mostly cash. And so Stephanie has this habit. Well, she'll swing into the gas station or Publix. She prefers Publix Diet Coke. She'll tell you about how they refrigerate the water lines, and that makes their Diet Coke better. And she will stop in the gas station, and she will get herself a Diet Coke. It's kind of her little treat, okay? And she will use cash, and there will always be coins left over. In a world where coins have so little purpose. And so most of the time, she drives her car, I drive my car. But this story was a little while ago. We were living in Ohio at the time. She had a very nice minivan. It's much nicer than my car. And so when we went on long trips to Florida to see Grandma and Grandpa, we would drive the minivan. And if you've ever had a Chrysler or a Dodge minivan, but this is like back in the 90s, they might still make them like this, but there was like a center thing that pulled out, and the cup holders would like pop out. You guys remember that? You pull it out, and then boom, pop, cup holders. And in the middle, between the two cup holders, there was like a tray. I think at one point probably an ashtray, and then later they're like, it's just a tray. And that is where Stephanie would put all of the pennies. And you would not believe how these pennies would accumulate. And so one time we're on a trip, and I'm driving her car, and now we're going through the drive-through to get the kids food or whatever, and I realize that they're going to hand us some drinks, and so I need the cup holders out. So I go to pull, and it's stuck. Like, it's jammed. There's no way I can get this to pull out. And so I'm wrestling with this while I'm trying to drive with one hand and go around the drive-through line and pull up to the window without, hitting the curb. And finally, I give it a hard yank, and it pops out, and pennies just go everywhere. It's like a little penny bomb went off in the car. And I am really, I don't know why, but this just really kind of pushed my buttons. You ever had this thing, you look back later and you're like, why did that? But I sort of had a moment there where I just kind of lost it. And my window was already down to go through the drive-thru, so I start scooping pennies by the fistful and just throwing them out the window. These serve no purpose. No one needs pennies in this world, And my kids in the back seat, they're probably like 7, 6, 5, and 4 at the time. And they're just like, their jaws are dropped. They're like, Daddy's throwing money out the window, If you've ever had a moment to not want your kids to follow your example financially, this was it. But I was absolutely done with the pennies, and I'm just throwing them out the window. And that's sort of one of the differences between my wife and I. She very much believes that she should save the pennies. I'm like, that's fine if you're going to spend them. I am more like, you know what? I am not going to have my life clogged up for 30 pennies that are just making my life a little bit more difficult. I would rather throw them out the window, okay? Who would rather throw the pennies out the window? Anybody with me? Then have them clog up your life? Yeah, it's pennies, for crying out loud. When do you get to use them in this world? How many of the rest of you are like, that's God's money you threw out the window, you are, okay, all right. So see, we are a little bit different in this world. And God's wired us differently. In fact, I believe the differences are what make the beautiful fabric of America work. And I want you to remember that because this is election week, and you should remember this week that God wired us differently. And the people who vote differently from you this week, by the way, they're not dumb and they're not evil. They're just wired a little bit differently, and they think a little bit differently, and they see the world a little bit differently. And you might actually be married to someone, or you might be roommates with someone, or you might be siblings with someone who sees the world a little bit differently. I want to illustrate that a little bit today because my hope is that we can talk about how to relate a little bit better with one another around money. Now, here's kind of a fun thing that we can celebrate together. How many of you have ever found yourselves in a situation where you had debt? And I don't mean, a home mortgage. I mean, you realized that there was a charge on the credit card or many charges on the credit card, and you were not going to be able to pay that in full, and you were going to carry debt forward, and maybe you carried that debt forward for months or even years, and then you finally got things under control, you got serious about your debt, you paid off all of your debt, and you became debt-free. Not counting the mortgage, I'm just saying you went through that. Yeah, go ahead and celebrate that. We should celebrate that, because that's a really great thing, right? Clap. You guys, when I say celebrate that, yeah, I know. You guys aren't used to live preachers in the room, but we need a little bit of participation. So this is a really cool thing, and I want to celebrate that. And if you've ever listened to Dave Ramsey's podcast on Fridays, that people call in, they do the debt-free scream. I've had friends actually drive to Nashville to do the debt-free scream. I think it's just like the most incredible emotional thing. When you hear someone share their story and then they do the debt-free scream, I mean, I am in tears. I listen to that podcast, I was driving down the road, I have tears going down my face because of these stories that people share. All right, how many of you, like Stephanie and I'm going to go first here, how many of you, like Stephanie and I, have paid off all of your consumer debt and then fast forward 10 years and you have consumer debt again? Yeah. Dang it. Right? And some of you lied just now. You didn't raise your hand. I'll let him raise his hand for me. But there's a reason why we go through some cycles with money. And that is because money is fascinating. Everything about money looks like a math problem. Because from our very first years when we learned about money, we learned about it like it was a math problem. But it's not a math problem. Money is so much deeper than that. Money is ingrained into the way that we were raised. It's ingrained into our personalities, as we're going to talk about a little bit today. It's even ingrained a little bit into our gender. There are all kinds of reasons why we see money and we think about money and we feel about money differently than we do any other kind of math problem. And so I want to put you to some good resources today. I also want you to know I am not smart enough to teach you about money. I am going to steal a lot of material from other people today. And so if after the service you come up and you're like, you plagiarized that. Yes, I did. Okay? I read a lot of books on this topic and I take a lot of notes and I want to pass on some of the helpful things that we learned today. And I want us to look at what Scripture says about how we can relate better with money as well. So first off, just a couple of good books. The Psychology of Money and Why Smart People Do Stupid Things with Money. These are books that help you understand that money is not a math problem. Money is a thinking problem. There's other good books out there too. Some of the classics, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and Millionaire Next Door, right? These help you understand that being successful with money has much less to do with, there's some misunderstanding out there that somehow, you just inherit it or it's just given to you. Did you know, by the way, that 80% of millionaires received no inheritance whatsoever, and only 3% of millionaires inherited more than $100,000 from their family? So that's tough. We don't like those statistics because that seems to indicate that becoming a millionaire has a lot more to do with behavior. That means I have to look at my behavior. And to look at my behavior means I've got to look at the way that I think and the way that I feel about money. Some other good resources, these are ones that lean more into biblical principles. This is the book that kind of made Dave Ramsey famous years and years ago. Financial Peace University came out of this book. A lot of people think Dave Ramsey is just about getting out of debt. Actually, I've heard people say, well, we don't need Dave Ramsey because we don't have any debt. Actually, Dave has a lot of great biblical principles on money. And if you're one of those people that doesn't have any debt, you need to read The Legacy Journey. That is a great book. It's all about how much is enough, how much is too much, what does it look like to leave an inheritance to your kids, those kinds of things. The Legacy Journey is a great resource. I highly recommend that. I'm going to lean into thriving in love and money quite a bit today. Shanti and Jeff Feldhan, if you're not familiar with them, they are well known for their research into the differences between men and women. They have a couple of books that are their bestsellers, For Men Only and For Women Only. Those are the titles. And they talk about the statistical research that they've done by polling tens of thousands of men and women to talk about the ways that they think and feel differently. So, in fact, this is a quote from Shanti's book, and I just think this is a really helpful, and maybe will give you a little bit of insight and hope for where we're going today. She says, because we hear money is the leading cause of divorce, we tend to believe money is the most serious issue in marriage. But the truth is more nuanced. Yes, money can be a real case of a cause of strife, but it can also be an opportunity for connection. And this is where I want us to go today, toward that opportunity toward connection. And it's not because money is more important than any other issue, it's because money is everywhere. Now, Stephanie and I have gone through different seasons where we have tracked every single transaction and where we've kind of done money in envelopes, which has been a little easier for us because we don't have to track every single transaction. We just sort of track it in bulk, if you will. But we've recently just moved back to tracking every single transaction, and it's mind-blowing when you start to do that because you don't realize until you start doing that how many daggone transactions you have every single day. Like money is just a constant thing that's happening in your world. And believe it or not, only 38% of us, according to our own responses to surveys, only 38% of us, when we spend money, make a conscious connection to our future opportunities and obligations. Only 38% of us are thinking when we spend money, this is going to have some kind of impact on my future. This is going to mean that there's not money available later on for something else that I want to do. Only 38% of us think about that, okay? So here's who this series is for. We're going to spend 3 weeks talking about this, and this series is for one of you who maybe fall on this list. First of all, if you are a believer, then this series is for you because you're someone who would say, I want to surrender my life to what God wants for me. I trust that my Heavenly Father knows me better than I know myself. I trust that my Heavenly Father wants what's best for me. And as we say in my house, we just believe that God's idea of better really is better. And if you're one of those people and you say, I want to follow Jesus, I want to give Jesus my life, then this series is going to be so helpful for you, and it's for you because you need to understand how to love people well in the midst of your finances. And just by the way today, we're not going to talk about budget at all today. There's none, like, you're going to be so, if you're we'll talk about free spirits in a minute, but you're just going to be so happy if you're one of the people that are like, I don't like this topic. This is about loving each other well. Okay, if you're an unbeliever, if you're someone who would say, you know what, I'm not sure I believe this whole thing about Jesus and he rose from the dead and, you know, I'm not ready to surrender my life and follow him. I want to say, first of all, thank you so much for being here. We're so glad you're here. We designed this church to be a place where you would feel comfortable and safe, where we could provide content to you that's helpful regardless of where you are in your spiritual journey, because the principles that I'm going to talk about today, I believe, are incredibly helpful and incredibly relevant, even if you don't believe that these principles came from God. If you just want to call it wisdom literature, that's fine. I believe these principles came from God, but they're still helpful to you, even if you don't believe this. So welcome, and thank you for being here. Now, men and women, we're going to talk a little bit today about the differences between how men naturally think and how women naturally think. There is a wiring in us that's naturally different. Now, as soon as I say that, I recognize that I'm stepping out on a little bit of thin ice because we're not all the same. Like, all men aren't the same and all women aren't the same. I'm going to turn in my man card here for a moment and tell you that I actually enjoy shopping. I know. All the guys just were like, whatever. But you know, we don't all fit into the bubble. My wife, her idea of shopping is in and out of the store in like 7 minutes flat. Get in, find what she needs, get it, get out, right? I'm like, oh, no. Part of it is like, I bumped into the Thompsons when I was at Costco. We had a whole chat about it. Like, to me, I don't know, I don't get out much, I guess. So this is where I get to socialize, and this is where I get to like find out, oh, people don't wear clothes like I wear anymore. They've moved on, you know? It's a whole experience for me to go to the mall. But I was raised, maybe this will help explain some of it. I was raised by 3 older sisters and a mother. I had 4 mothers growing up. And they all loved to shop. And so this was like a family activity we did. My mom had a bumper sticker that said, "Follow me to the mall." So it's just something I came by naturally. And as a kid, I learned how to entertain myself in the department stores. And, you know, I'm just different that way than how you might. So I want to say that up front, that when we characterize men and women, I recognize that we're all, you know, a little bit outside the box. There are nerds and there are free spirits. This is Dave Ramsey language, and I love it. The first time I heard Dave Ramsey talk like this, it was so helpful because I grew up hearing that there are people who are good with money and there are people who are, thank you, audience participation, bad with money. Yeah, there are people who are good with money, people with bad money. I don't know who I first heard talk about that, probably my parents. Maybe for other people, oh, you know, so-and-so, they're, you know, that family, they're good with money, that family, bad with money, whatever. And you sort of get this thing like, that's how it is. And Dave Ramsey introduced this whole new language when we first went through Financial Peace University 12 or 14 years ago, where he said, you know what, there are nerds and there are free spirits. And I love that language so much better. There are nerds and there are free spirits. And, you know, free spirits are the ones that, like, when it's time to sit down and have the family budget meeting, the free spirits are like, I wanted to do this meeting, but this other thing came up. Like, they will come up with any excuse possible not to sit down and talk about the budget. Whereas the nerds, right? If you're a nerd, you're with me, I'm a nerd. The nerds, man, we love ourselves a spreadsheet, don't we? Like, we have never met a problem that can't be solved with a spreadsheet. I spreadsheet everything. Stephanie's like, that's not even about numbers. I'm like, oh, it is. Everything's about numbers. You know, I can spreadsheet stuff, I can weight things, I can give them a score, I can make charts and graphs. And as a result, when I come to that family budget meeting, here's what we finally have discovered, and Dave Ramsey helped us with this. What I'm really looking for is an attaboy. It took us years to realize this. I used to say, I want her to take this seriously, right? And she would be like, there are tabs on your spreadsheet. I don't do spreadsheets with tabs. Why would you have more than one, you know? Oh no, because this gets, you know, this is like, I've got the whole deal all mapped out. And consequently, if you're a nerd, and I'm a nerd, so I'm speaking right to you, we gotta back down a little bit, nerds, because we will walk in and we want to make this whole thing. And let me just tell you, if you're a free spirit, you need to know this. You just need to tell them what a great job they did with their spreadsheet, okay? It will help so much. That's really what we're looking for. We're looking for an attaboy. But whether you're a nerd or a free spirit, you're going to benefit from this today. Now, if you're a free spirit, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're the problem child in the relationship. It could just mean you're a free spirit. You know, Stephanie and I, we don't, so there's savers and spenders. That's our next one. Savers and spenders. It turns out there's a thought sometimes that if you're a nerd, you're automatically a saver, and if you're a free spirit, you're automatically a spender, but that's not necessarily true. Stephanie and I, turns out, are both spenders, which is a real problem. It's just that she spends money on little things, right? And so, you know, women, this, again, I know I'm being generalizing, but it doesn't all fit in this package, but this typically tends to be, a lot of surveys, women will spend on little things. They don't really, like, the little things add up, right? And so maybe it's a pair of shoes, right? And so women might build a collection of shoes. And it's easy for men to feel like, wow, that's just like ridiculous spending. It's completely unnecessary. And then he comes home with a $3,000 television. Completely legitimate, right? And she's like, that is 100 pairs of shoes. And he's like, I know, but look at that, you know, like football season. So this is often the difference, right? That we have nerds, we have free spirits, we have savers, we have spenders. And here's the thing. I'm going to be a little bit different in these 3 weeks than maybe some of what you've heard traditionally. I want to celebrate the differences. I want to say, I have a good friend that says that every mom is a Democrat, every dad is a Republican, right? Every mom is like, honey, do you have everything you need? What can I provide for you? How can I take care of you? And every dad is like, you don't work, you don't eat. Okay? That's just how it goes, right? And here's the thing. Both of those kinds of people are necessary in this world. we actually are better for one another, but we've got to figure out how to relate and how to communicate in this. Now, maybe you're a planner, maybe you're somebody who's spontaneous, maybe you come from a rich background, maybe you're rich here today, maybe you feel very poor, or you come from a poor background, which maybe that's just a mindset you've carried forward. All of us in all of these categories today and the next couple of weeks, I really think is going to be helpful for you. If you're single, if you're married, if you're married, the implications are going to be really easy with this series. If you're single, you might have to put a little more work into thinking about, how do I connect with somebody else on this topic? Or how does my feelings around money, how does it impact my relationships with my siblings? How does it impact my relationships with my parents? How does it impact my relationships with my nieces, my nephews, my kids, all of this? And I think that there are tremendous implications for this. Because here's the thing, and here's where I want to kind of like rescue us from. Money starts as a financial problem. And very, very quickly, it becomes an emotional problem. It becomes maybe even a sense of panic for us. Or maybe it's just absolute frustration because your spouse, your partner is repeating behavior that you feel like you've talked about, you feel like you've addressed, and it's coming up again. And it becomes very emotional, and it becomes very serious for us. And then at some point, it even becomes like about your whole story arc. You lay in bed perhaps, and you begin to think, we're on a path that is not only making me feel tension now, but it's going to lead to absolute disaster in the future. We're on a path that is going to mean tragedy. It's going to mean bankruptcy. Is this going to be my legacy? Is this going to be our story that we just kept sliding and sliding and sliding until my friends know me as the guy or the girl that filed for bankruptcy? Where is this going? How bad is this going to get? And it creates a lot of stress and a lot of fear and a lot of tension. And I really do want to say we can come alongside this over the next few weeks, and we can move together. We can move forward together on this. This is a Belgian plow horse. And a Belgian plow horse is one of the strongest animals around. A Belgian plow horse, believe it or not, can pull 8,000 pounds. One Belgian plow horse can pull 8,000 pounds. Now, I find that incredible because I have a Suburban, and my Suburban can tow 8,000 pounds. My Suburban has 285 horsepower. So this one horse, has 285 horsepower, which that just kind of feels very confusing. But that's a really, really powerful horse, right? Here's what's fascinating about this. If you take two Belgian plow horses and you put them together, you would think that those two Belgian plow horses together could pull 16,000 pounds, right? But actually, those two Belgian plow horses together, with no training, on their first day pulling together, can pull 24,000 pounds. Not twice, but 3 times what one of them can pull alone. And if you train these horses together and they learn how to pull as a team, if they are yoked together, these two Belgian plow horses that individually can only pull 8,000 pounds, together they can now pull 32,000 pounds. They're each able to double their individual capacity, and then you put that together 4 times their individual capacity because they work together as a team. I want to tell you that over the next few weeks, if you begin to work together as a team, if you begin to pay attention to these principles, then you can turn around this cycle that you've had in your finances, not because you've learned some math tricks, but because you've learned how to relate to one another well. So let's look to the ultimate source of relational health and wisdom. Let's look at what the Bible has to say about relating well with finances. This is from James. James is the brother of Jesus, and that's just a cool story in and of itself, that Jesus had a brother who, as far as we know, was not a follower of Jesus when Jesus was alive and during his ministry years, but something happened that dramatically changed James' life. And James went from being not a follower of Jesus to calling Jesus not just his brother, but his Lord. And that event was the resurrection. It completely changed James' life. And James wrote a letter to other Christians. And from this letter, we can pull some incredible wisdom today. He says, "My dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen," which is a very interesting use of language. The word quick here is like fast, like almost like you're trying to race the other person. You're trying to race the other person to listen, which is really weird, right? Because oftentimes when we're in a conversation, especially if it's an emotionally charged conversation, if it's a conversation that feels a little bit like maybe not just a conversation, but a little bit like a debate, we are quick to speak. We race to speak. We try to speak before the other person. But James is saying, no. You need to be in a race to listen, quick to listen, and slow to speak. Slow to speak, as if you're waiting for the other person to express themselves. And what's so interesting about money conversations is that we tend to think that this is about the facts, especially if you're a nerd like me. Like, honey, it's just math and that's all there is to it, right? Sometimes as nerds, we can act like we went in and we actually didn't go into our office and work on the budget. We actually went up to the top of the mountain and met with God. And we came down with the budget on stone tablets and we say, this is the math. This is what it is. But in the middle of these money conversations, there needs to be a lot of room to listen. So we need to be slow to speak and quick to listen. Actually racing to listen. Waiting when someone finishes. Count to 10. You ever tried that exercise? It's tough. It's very hard to do. They finish their thought. Just sit there for a minute. Nod. I know your worst fear is that they'll keep going, right? But you will find that when they keep going, sometimes they begin to dig up some stuff that they didn't even know was there. You might actually learn something along the way. So he says, "My dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak," and then this one's very interesting, "slow to become angry." Almost like we have control of whether or not we become angry. Almost like we can control the pace of our emotions. You ever felt that? Like you're in a conversation and things are a little bit tense and you feel a little something going on inside of you. You feel a little bit of emotion welling up inside of you. And believe it or not, you can encourage that feeling or you can tamp that feeling back down. I know it feels like, oh, it's just my feelings. It's just how I feel. I know, but you are to be slow to become angry because, and this is really important, because human anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires. You might feel like you have righteous anger, but James is saying, no, human anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires. Therefore, get rid of. And this word for get rid of is actually the word that we would use to like take off a piece of clothing, take off a coat. You're like wearing something, you're wearing this moral filth and the evil that is so prevalent. You're wearing this, and you're going to take this off. You're going to get rid of this anger. You're going to shed that, and instead you're going to be quick to listen and slow to speak and slow to become angry. Get rid of all moral filth and the evil that is so prevalent, and humbly accept the word planted in you, which can save. That the word, the truth of Jesus Christ and his love and his grace and his life-changing truth, all of that has been planted in you and it can save you. All right. So, time's short, but I want to talk through some practical ways that we can apply this scripture in our lives. Because I believe that conversations around money can actually pave the path to intimacy. That your conversations around money don't have to be full of tension. That in fact, conversations around money can be something that bring you together. Stephanie and I have discovered this, that by sitting down and by talking about our finances, it doesn't start this way. It's not often this way, even in the middle, but we can find a place where we can end where we're moving toward the same goals, the same dreams, the same desires, that we can sit down together and and this is all I want you to do this week. There's no homework this week that's like, go home and make a budget. This is not a math class. What I want you to do is I want you to have some conversations this week that don't involve the budget, that don't involve his spending or her spending, but I want you to have some conversations around your why. What is it that's driving you? What is it that you're passionate about? What are your dreams? What excites you? Because you can find that through these money conversations, they can actually be a path to intimacy, not a source for division. But first, we've got to understand a couple of very practical things. First of all, our values are different, okay? Now, this might seem really basic, especially this first one, that some people value things, and some people value services, and some people value experiences. The difference is that you might say, well, but things matter more than experiences. Or you might say, well, experiences obviously matter more. You know, it's amazing in this research that Jeff and Shanti did on men and women and studied couples, how often the word obvious came up. That people say, well, this is obvious. Yes, it is obvious. If you are you've had your life experiences and you're wired the way you're wired. It's not obvious to your spouse. It's not obvious to your brother, your sister, your parents, other people who've had different experiences. So for example, I don't know, there might be let's just say this. So Stephanie and I like to go to the movies. She really loves to go to the movies. That's her favorite thing to do on a date night, is to go to the movies. And I learned when we were dating that going to the movies for her is synonymous with spending about the same as our mortgage payment on popcorn and a Diet Coke. Again, the Diet Cokes, right? So we go to the movies, and when we were dating, I was terrible at this. Because I know you're dating, you're supposed to have your best foot forward, but I grew up in a family where we did not buy the popcorn and the drinks. There's no way. We might have smuggled some things into the theater, but we would not buy things at the theater, right? And so now I had this girlfriend, and she was really cute, and I really wanted to spend time with her, but she wanted to spend a lot of money buying this bucket of popcorn. Now, fast forward, we've been married 30 years, and I can honestly say I walk into the theater, and I am joyfully buying the popcorn for her. And I mean that with all my heart. I'm joyfully buying popcorn for her because I recognize that I am not buying her a $20 bucket of popcorn. I am buying her an experience that she deserves, that she's earned, that we've had like a week or a month or however long it's been since we've been in the movies last time, and if she wants to experience the movies with a bucket of popcorn and a Diet Coke, then God bless her, right? I mean, I really do. But you have to move from I'm buying a bucket of popcorn to I'm buying my wife an experience. You need to learn to understand your spouse. You need to learn to see and hear your spouse. And that means you're going to have to be quick to listen and slow to speak. Sometimes some of us value saving for tomorrow, and others of us are like carpe diem. It's a difference in how we're wired. Now, I know that it's real easy to be like, well, save for tomorrow. That's the right thing to do. And carpe diem's the wrong thing to do. But you need to spend some time having a conversation about why your spouse feels that way. Probably there's some experiences they've been robbed of because they waited too long, and they don't want to be robbed of experiences again. And they feel like if I wait, maybe I'll never experience that. You need to spend some time listening to your spouse. Planner or in the moment. Maybe you're somebody who's like, you know what, this just feels like a little bit out of control, feels kind of spontaneous. Isn't it funny how God so often puts us together with someone who sees the world differently than we do? I think God does that on purpose. He wants to pull you a little bit closer to the other person's way of experiencing the world. And you need to recognize that there is credibility to their way of seeing and experiencing the world. How about this? Giving or preserving? Some of us feel more comfortable with $20,000 at Merrill Lynch or Schwab than we feel giving $20,000 away. Which I think is kind of ironic because we're saying essentially is I trust Merrill Lynch or Schwab more than I trust God. That we have this crazy belief around here that everything that we have comes from God, everything we have belongs to God, and when I give, I'm giving back to God. I'm not giving even to a specific organization. It's much more personal and much more spiritual than that. I am giving back to God as a recognition of his goodness and his provision in my life, and I'm demonstrating that I trust him. That if I give away a percentage of what I have or a percentage of my income, that God is more able than I am to replace that. Let that hang for a minute. But you need to, regardless of where you are on either side of that, you need to spend some time having a conversation with your spouse and understanding why they feel the way they feel on this topic. Time or money. Some of us would say, you know what? I am going to fix my own car. I'm going to do my own oil changes, and that's going to save me money. Some of us would say, it's $30 for an oil change, and I wouldn't even know where to begin. I am gladly going to pay for that service to save myself the time. We have maybe grown up in a home where you just feel like one of these approaches is right and one of these is wrong, and it's worth having a conversation with your spouse and recognize they're both valid. All right, those are our values. Let's talk about our fears a little bit. We have different sets of fears. Oh, wait, did I skip a slide? Go back one because I thought this is worth not skipping over. 67%. This is fascinating. Read this in Shanti's book. 67% of us, when surveyed, said, if my partner were objective, they would agree with me, which is an interesting statistic. If you're not really good with math, then that means that there's an impossible number, right? Like 67% of us can't all be right. If that our spouse was objective, they would agree with me. But that is the way that most of us feel. It's fascinating. If they would just look at the facts, they would agree with me. We need to back down a bit. Here's a interesting quote from Kurt Thompson. He is a psychiatrist and a neurobiologist. He says, human beings never make decisions because they make sense. We make sense of things that feel right. So real quickly, different ways that men and women feel fear. And this is the single statistic that was the biggest differentiator between men and women in Jeff and Shanti's study. The single biggest difference is that men have this kind of recurring thought that's going through their head. Our finances are okay until they're not. If you wonder sometimes what your husband is thinking about finances, he has this more than 2/3 of men say that this is prevalent all the time in their mind. That they are at some level every day thinking about the idea that, yeah, our finances are fine right up until they're not, right? And it turns out that's not a prevalent thought for most women. Instead, the prevalent fear that's going through a woman's mind is our marriage is okay, our kids are healthy, right up until they're not. And she's thinking about the kids, and she's thinking about the relationships, and she's thinking about the marriage, and he's thinking about the finances. And so what happens is you sometimes bump into what feels like a difference in budget or whatever, but really she's valuing the family, she's valuing the time together, she's valuing the relationships. He's looking at it from the grid of, if we spend this money now, we'll never be able to retire. I'm going to be a greeter at Walmart, on and on down the line, right? And so we have to recognize that we have values that separate us, we have fears that separate us, and then finally, I love this illustration, we treat the windows on our screen a little differently. You've heard this illustration before, right? That men are, pretty much have one thing on their mind at a time, and women have lots of windows open on their screen. So if you picture someone's mind like a computer screen, women have all these screens open, and they can kind of handle that and multitask it. Men pretty much have one window open at a time. Well, here's something that's really fascinating that I learned through Jeff and Shanti's research is that men can sort of just unilaterally decide to close a window. Like they can just do that. They could just click on the X and the little red button and close the window. So if there is an uncomfortable thought that's in their head, men can just go like, don't like that, close it. Women don't have that same ability. Women can't close a window unless there's a plan of action. They have to know what the plan is. So here's a typical thing, okay? My son Chase, this is like 10 years ago, we're water skiing. He manages to wipe out over the front, and his slalom ski hits him right in the forehead, opens up a nice gash. You know those head wounds are? They're so awesome. It's like blood everywhere. Take a picture. And so he's bleeding all his face, and it's a pretty good gash, and it is on his face. And so maybe, should get stitches. But I'm like, we have 3 boys. You can buy, that glue that they use at the emergency room? You can buy that on Amazon for $22. This is not included in the price of your admission. This is just free advice. You can buy those tubes of skin glue on Amazon for $22. Do you know what they charge at Baptist? And I will call you out, Baptist. $400. It's the exact same stuff. When I was on the phone with the billing department, she said, well, we don't buy ours from Amazon. I said, well, maybe you should. So we're at the lake, and my son gets this gash, and he's bleeding, and I'm like, it's okay. I've got this covered. I got butterfly bandages in the car. I've got that clear bandages you put on. I got it all in the car. Well, we keep it in the car. I have 3 boys. And so I'm like, I'll just glue him up, and he'll be good to go. Stephanie's like, I really feel like we need to take him to the ER. This is how I know that they charge $400. Now, there's a difference in our windows, right? I can just close that window because I know that if we go there, that's going to be a $1,200 visit to the ER. But she can't close that window without taking action. She has to feel like she's done something to take care of her child. And until you understand that you are not having a conversation about money, you are having a conversation about something that is much more deep-seated than that, you're not going to make progress. And here's the other fascinating thing that I discovered in reading some of this material. When we close a window on our screen, we often are opening a window on our spouse's screen. Sometimes we're like, oh, I can close that window, bing, and it just pops open on your spouse's screen. And that's not fair. You've just transferred the stress from you to them. And let me say something especially to the guys. And guys, I want you to love coming to church. I don't want you to feel like you're getting beat up by the preacher, but I'm a guy, okay? And I just know that sometimes I got that one screen and it's just easier for me to click that window and make it go away, and I feel better. But I've just made that screen appear, that window appear on Stephanie's screen, and that's not fair. And when it comes to finances, way too many of us men have just said, I'm not good with money. It's not really my thing. She handles all the money, and I just get an allowance. Guys, and I love you, I love you, I love you. You're not a child. You don't get an allowance. You are a partner in this. You need to step up and you need to be a partner in this. It is not fair to your wife to close the window and just transfer all that trust to her screen. I love you. You can do this. You can step up. You can be a man. You can lead. In fact, I want you to know what the word provider actually means. This is fascinating, but the word provide, if you think about it, pro means ahead, right? And vide comes from the root for vision or to look ahead. A provider is not just someone who brings home money. A provider means you are looking ahead. You are providing. You are looking down the road ahead. And that is your role in the house. You are partners together. You got to come into this together as partners. In fact, Dave Ramsey says, if you're a free spirit and you're a nerd and you come together for your budget meeting, you need to do this. The nerd has to not leave the budget meeting until the free spirit changes one thing in the budget. You've got to say, no, it's not enough to just nod, which is what the free spirit wants to do, because the free spirit wants the meeting to be over as quickly as possible. Okay, looks good, I'll do that. They're thinking, off to Home Depot I go, right? Off to Target. No, you've got to actually own it together. You've got to work on this together. Okay, so that's about the windows. It's not about the money. It is about something that is much more deep-rooted. So, next steps. Here we go. Be quick to listen, slow to speak. Start with the why before the what. If you're having conflict over the what, it means you didn't start with the why. You've got to start with the why before you get to the what. Ask questions. Label objections. This is a really great principle where you actually restate their objections back to them. That's evidence that you've listened well, that you've been quick to listen and slow to speak. If you can restate their objections to them and they say, yes, that's my concern, that's my fear, you get it, you're hearing me. And here's a crazy one. Say, you may be right. Now, I'm not talking about if somebody's accusing you of, you stole money and you didn't steal money, but I'm talking about when it's a matter of perspective, when it's a matter of believing, when it's a matter of coming into this with different wiring and different fears and different values, you should practice this phrase. It's incredibly disarming, and it's something you need to hear yourself saying. You may be right. In the end, my hope is that you'll be like the characters in Avatar that learn to greet one another by saying, I see you. Remember that? I see you. In the context of money, I believe that you can reach a place with your spouse where you can see your spouse and you can be seen. And that your conversations can go way beyond money. And then they can deal with the emotions and the hopes and the dreams and the future that you want to have together. And so I'm going to give you some questions, 21 questions that you can go on a money date. I know that sounds so exciting to some of you, but you can go on a date. Some of your dates, you should talk about your dreams and your hopes and your vision for the future, and that's where I just want you to start. I just want you to start with dreaming a little bit together and to come together on the same page. So tomorrow, I'm going to send out an email with 21 questions that you can use to go out to Starbucks, go out to dinner, have a nice conversation, and talk about your dreams around money a little bit together. If you are not already getting our emails, stop at the 4 St. John's table on your way out. Give us your email address, and I'll make sure that you get an email tomorrow to start this conversation. And then next week, we'll pick it up here as we continue the series on relating with money. God, thanks so much for this chance to bring your truth and your wisdom into our everyday life in a really practical way. Help us to be quick to listen, slow to speak, and help us to be overflowing with love. We ask all of this in your name. Amen. Thanks a lot. See you guys next week. And if I haven't met you yet, I'd love to meet you. I'll be in the hallway at the table that says 4 St. John's with a free gift.